The difference with all these Gulf Islands ferries is they're not a tourist boat so much as they are the other end of the highway. The dentist, the doctor, most of the shopping's over there. I mean, we have grocery stores here, but people have to go to town for their appointments and specialists and all this. So it's part of the highway. It's a road. It's not just a place for the Winnebagos and the motorhomes to come in the summer and, you know, see the dolphins leaping and the salmon jumping and that. I mean, this is a real lifeline. You know, everybody's from different lifestyles, lives in different houses, does different things with their hobbies. But without fail and exception, the ferry is the one thing they all have in, you know, if you go to the coffee shop, sooner or later somebody will say something about the ferry. They've all got it in common. We all do. The crew, the people that live here, the people that come here in the summer, that's one common element. So it's very important to the community to have these ferries. When I started in the ferries, it was Department of Highways. I did that for 5 years with Department of Highways, and in 1985 became BC Ferries. So I worked officially for BC Ferries since 1985 to 2015. So that's 30 years. And I was a captain on the Powell River Queen for 20. And for 2.5 years, my first job as captain was on the Gabriel Island ferry, the Quinsam. And so that was the absolute first time I had command. And then I did that and came back to Quadra and spent the rest of my career here. This is about the most treacherous part for approaching the dock. It looks simple, but there's two marker dolphins. That's the port hand, that's the starboard hand. If you notice, they have two different symbols on the top, as well as they'll have a flashing light that flash different sequences. If you have a really big tide going through here in the fog, when you have no visibility, this is the dicey moment, because you can see how close we can get here. 1988, they brought a ferry up from Gabriola, and they thought it might be suitable for this run. And there was two other marker dolphins in line with this one that went into the harbor. When they slowed the ship down at the point where we normally, with this one, would slow down, bigger horsepower, the tide caught it, it went sideways and it took out both the dolphins. The senior captain was, luckily I was on the deck when this happened. And they were never replaced, but the next day they took that ferry off the run. It was only here 4 days. So what I'm pointing out is that the tide, it looks like a short run, but the tide here is unbelievably fast. And it can be, like, we used to call it a career buster, if you're not setting for the tide on the way across and counteracting it. Thing with the markers on the dolphins, if you're in the fog and you have a crew down there watching, doing fog watch, and they suddenly see something, they can tell from the day marks, so they could tell the captain or the mate which dolphin they're looking at. You know, if it's that one, they know exactly where they are when they see the day mark on it. So if you see the square one, okay, we know we're in the right position. We've got to be north of that going into Campbell Rivers. It can get really bad. We've had it so you couldn't even see in the dock till you were right on top of it, and even then you couldn't see the parking lot. So those are the days I don't miss. Right, first day of my retirement, I heard the fog whistle going on the ferry. I went, oh, that's lovely, I'm not there. I mean, we could all do it, it's just it's not as a relaxing day. Oh yeah, you go down through the lounge, see all the people there, school kids, you're going, yeah, everybody's, it comes to one little point in the wheelhouse, you on the radar, making the right decisions. You probably notice it doesn't have a steering wheel. It's got 4 propellers, 2 on each end. They have to be turned, the front ones have to be turned 180 degrees to provide the braking for the vessel, basically. Instead of going astern propulsion, you're turning them around and they're pushing backwards. So then it's just a balancing act to get it in. You're hovering into the dock, working the front 2 against the back 2 that are pushing still. And then when you touch down, you have just enough of a bank cushion between the ship and the dolphin so they don't hit hard. It's something, it comes with years of ship handling, so you're not bashing into the dock all the time. And then you take the front 2 out while you're in the dock, and you just have the back 2 pushing, and then they put the lines on. So you're trying to keep it off these other dolphins coming in, pivot point of the vessel's right in the middle. So if you're not remembering where the stern is, it'll just swing. So the whole time you're thinking of all 4 corners of the ship to get it in a straight line so it's not swinging wildly. So this is my first discharge book, which was how we kept track of sea time. It was an old-fashioned style of book because you had to go down and get your picture taken, go to the Transport Canada office in Vancouver at the time, and you'd use it when you went on board. The skipper would sign you on or sign you off. You had to sign another book that he had in the wheelhouse. It's the old-fashioned way of saying, making sure it was before they had unions, I'm sure, when they had to, companies had to ensure that the crew would be fed properly and so much of this, so much of that, so many steaks a week and all that kind of thing. So you signed that book that everybody agreed, the captain and the crew, and then you'd also have this book that kept track when you were on the boat, and there was stamps in there for, each ship had their own stamp with their tonnage, which was good when you went to get your sea time figured out. And the day you left, the day you came back, who the captain was, the tonnage of the vessel, and that carried it with you wherever you went. Well, I got to sign on articles officially at the time. You had to be 18, and I was 17, 3 or 4 months shy of my 18th birthday. But nobody questioned it. They just looked at the year you were born. So that actually is a picture of me when I was 17. And when you got your different certificates, radio certificate, lifeboat and all that, they were designed at the time, the same size as the book, so you could stick them in there and have them as a record. So I don't know if these are in use anymore in Canada. So it's sort of like a collector's item now. I had a lot of short stories that won awards when I was in high school and poetry and stuff. So I was thinking I was going to be a writer, but the minute I spent time on the boat, it just clicked, and it was very interesting. And they had I went into manpower because I was working at a restaurant in town and pay the rent. And I was looking for something to do in the fall. I didn't want to work in the restaurant. And there was the brochure for deckhand training at the Pacific Marine Training Institute. So that really jumped out at me. And so I went and took that course in '77 and then started going to the Union Hall in Vancouver. So it was unusual. I spent a lot of time being the only girl in the class, only girl in firefighting, but I mean, it wasn't because I was a girl. It was just that's what my interest was. So and that doesn't change. I still like being on the water. I remember going and applying for a deckhand job with BC Ferries in 1977. And they said, no, we only hire women in catering. This was at the Horseshoe Bay terminal. And that just made me even more, gung-ho to do it. So to me now that's changed. They wouldn't say that to you now, but I really didn't want to use the female card. I want everybody to think I got the job because I deserved it. Not because I was the token female, but it was hard when you're the first female. There's still, there's the backroom whispers and, oh, she probably knew this or did that or, and that does follow women still. Well, when I finally did the unionized work in the towboats, I went to Vancouver, and in those days, you didn't go into the companies to get a job. You had to go to the union hall. There was 2 different union halls, and one was a little bit more welcoming than the other. Now, the Canadian Brotherhood of Railway Transport and General Workers, they allowed non-members into the hall, and you could put your name on the list, and if there was no regular union member there and a job came up that you're qualified for, you could get the job. And they called them 2 or 3 different times a day at set times. So there's nobody in the hall when a job came in from C-span or Rivtow. Whoever was in there would get the job. So us people that were not members, we made it a job to sit there every day for months. Luckily, the first time I was in the hall, I was only there 3 days, and they actually called me at home. Asked if I didn't mind going as a cook instead of a deckhand, because the cook had showed up at the towboat company and was drunk as a skunk. And they had to sail right away because they had to pick up some barges. So they said, well, let's see, maybe Esther will go out, and because they knew I didn't drink. So that was my first job. It was fun until we got on the West Coast. I had no idea I'd get seasick out there. So that was an eye-opener, but eventually you get used to it. But when you're right in the middle of it, not so much fun. And you're the cook. So did have one skipper that thought, oh, well, it's great girls out here. I never have to go ashore. That didn't work. Yeah, they tried to sneak in the cabin once, and that was the last time he tried that. I guess I looked young and stupid, but I wasn't young and stupid. And the other thing is a lot of the crew had daughters my age, so there was a real protective feeling out there instead of like I wasn't scared to be with all these guys because they're all family people. And one of the ships I worked on, the wives came, we were laid over in Maple Ridge on the river, and the wives came down. One of them brought me seasick medicine. So it was kind of actually supportive for the most part. So it also helped to be a good cook by that time. I know otherwise, might not have still been out there for that long. That was just to pay the bills at that time, and I took my one boat. They said it was cook deckhand, but they still wouldn't count the time at the office, even though they BS'd it for me, the captain. So I thought, well, I don't want to stay in the towboats. I was making really good money cooking, and by the time I worked for C-span for 2 years, and by the time I left there, I was in the top 10 of cooks because it was a learning curve. And if you didn't want to mutiny, you sure had to learn to cook. And I waited till one of the crew I worked with knew the senior captain that was on the Quadra ferry in the early 80s, late 70s. And he said, well, just go up there, mention my name, and then maybe they'll let you apply. So I did do that. And the next time I got off the tugboat and came through, the mate came down from the wheelhouse, saw me walk on and said, oh, the captain wants to see you, and they offered me a job. So that was great. And I think I was offered the job on the Friday, had to go back to C-span on the Saturday and give them 48 hours notice, and they were going away for a week on the tug, so they had to bring in another cook, and I started Monday on the ferry. So that was in 1980. Lots of people have ambition, some want to be doctors, lawyers. I wanted to eventually, be an officer. So I was happy to get that job. Yeah. There's not a lot of adventure. You're parking the cars. You're spending 4 or 5 years to get actual sea time to get your mate's ticket. So most of it is going to work, doing your 8 hours, going home, parking the cars, but still learning stuff. So it's not the same as, oh, I want to be a mate and next year I'm going to go to school. You actually had to accumulate actual days worked. And on this ferry, we had to have about 36 months actual days worked, not 3 years, could take you 6 years to get that 36 months. The sea time didn't count 100%, but you could count 50% of it. So every time you did a day, it was actually worth half a day for sea time. So it was recommended that it go to other runs that were like a different classification, longer sailings. Texada was a home trade 3, Queen of the North, Queen of Prince Rupert. I did go up there, but I didn't get any time as mate. So then I transferred to Texada because it was considered a home trade 3, sea time counted. It's a bit longer run to Campbell River, so I was there for a year, and then I went to the Comox ferry. So what I did is I kept moving around to get the better sea time for captain. And by 1992, I had enough sea time. So in 86, I got mate's ticket. 6 years later, I had the time for captain. So I went and did all those tickets on my own, more or less. I think I might have one course maybe they paid for. You were learning stuff, and then when you got your sea time, you got all signed off, then you'd apply to go to school. And in those days, they actually, it was Department of Highways, they'd actually pay your way to school. And I found when I got to the point where I had the sea time, senior captain was from the old school, and he said, oh, just because you're a good deckhand doesn't mean you're going to be a good mate, so he wouldn't approve it. But the Canadian Constitution had just come out then where you had the right to do this, that, and the other. So I got a copy of the Constitution and went to the office in Courtenay with my union rep. When they decided that perhaps I wasn't a pushover, all of a sudden I got education leave, and the new senior captain came with my little ferry pass for going to school. But I think they realized that this is probably a good investment because I wasn't going to back down. Oh, the day I got my ticket, I was down at Victoria, and the steamship inspector, or the examiner, we went through I did everything textbook, answered all the questions, and then after that, you said, okay, you got your ticket, you go out and the secretary types it all up for you and gives you an interim copy. Well, it was lunchtime and everybody was gone in the office, and I was anxious to drive back home to Quadra, and he says, well, I guess we're gonna have to go for lunch now, and of course, I guess, for him, it was the first female captain he'd cleared as a steamship inspector, or, the examiner. To me, I was just like, yeah, okay, go for lunch. And I just like, I can't wait to get back and get my ticket. And on the way home, so I finally get the ticket, I stopped to visit Jock Palmer. He was living in Victoria then. He was our future senior captain. Stopped and showed him the ticket, and then I racing up the highway, and I was literally racing up the highway, and I got a speeding ticket on my way home. So I was, sir, please, can you give me a break? I just got my captain's ticket, and he's busy writing the ticket out. Didn't matter to him. So yeah, I got another ticket that day besides the captain's ticket. And then I came back and waited and waited and waited. There was excuse after excuse not to let me get cleared as captain. None of them valid, just the girl thing. So that's what my observation. So it wasn't until 1993 I got cleared on the Gabriola run, and then I was scheduled to work in about 2 weeks as a skipper, and I took my horse for a ride and broke my leg. So 10 days before my first shift as captain, I had a broken leg, and I'm arguing in emergency down in Comox, no, I don't have a broken leg. I have to go to work. I'm going to be the first captain. So I was off for about 10 weeks, and I remember having to go to the company doctor, and you had to hop up and down on your broken leg and all that, and I just gritted my teeth and just did it. And he says, usually employees are in here trying to find an excuse not to go back to work, but I was so anxious that I was only off 10 weeks, and then I did my first shift just before Christmas in '93, I guess. So there's the tenacity again. I limped my way to the wheelhouse, but I did it. And there was no captains. I think there may have been one at Northland Navigation in Vancouver in the 70s, or a mate, she was a mate, I'm not sure, but I didn't meet her. And there were several female cooks at Seaspan. Well, I was actually working on opposite shift on the Seaspan Queen with another lady cook. So, I mean, that wasn't unusual. There weren't a lot of us, but there were women out there, so. And on little private tugs, once in a while you see girl deckhands because dad owns a tug sort of thing, yeah. When I was first working as captain here, I didn't have a specific watch, so I'd sometimes do 9 days in a row, and as it turned out, when we had the worst fog, I did 9 days in a row in fog, and it was pea soup fog. Couldn't see the dock, you couldn't see the ferry when you were coming to work, when you're walking down the ramp. And the joke was I went through 3 different mates because 3 different cycles of shifts went through, and I was still the captain on morning shift for 9 days straight in the fog. I could feel it in my shoulders every day when I got off because you're just so tense. You're so responsible. You can't make a mistake. You're depending on your electronics, your crew, your lookouts and everything. So the 9 days was stressful, but we did it. And afterwards, I went and bought the crew a beer at the pub because they had done such a good job. We all work as a team. It's not just one. It's, all of us. Everybody had a job. But it was, you do feel satisfied after, but in the middle of it, you're just so tense and worried about everybody's safety, and you know you can do the job, but it's not relaxing, that's for sure. They used to have a foghorn down at the lighthouse, and you could actually hear it. And so when you were a captain, if you woke up at 5, get ready for work, and you heard that foghorn, it was like your shoulders would slump because you knew it was going to be a stressful day. We can handle the job, but it's just like, it's not as relaxing as just looking out the window and seeing everything. So they did replace that foghorn down there, and it was a lot quieter. And one of the guys, that when he got his captain's ticket, somebody snuck down there the day before and put a blanket over the old foghorn sensor. So it went off on his first day as captain, even though it wasn't foggy. So that always was a general theme between all the captains, that foghorn. So the first day after I was off the ferry, I heard ship's whistles out there in the fog. I just could roll over and go back to sleep. It was kind of nice after 35 years to not have to either stand a watch or be on the deck in the fog. So. I enjoyed actually working at Gabriola because it was my first command, and it was the same thing. I had a really good crew there. And that's when I took up golf, because I had to camp there on my, when I got off shift, I couldn't go home because I had to be there again in the morning. And the whole crew golfed. So it was great. We do a morning shift and then everybody go home and change, get their golf clubs, and we go golf in the Gabriola golf course. So I really enjoyed working there and for my first couple of years as captain, but I was happy to come back to Quadra because it's my home. So, but I'm glad I went and got other experience, because I didn't want to look like I'd just spent my whole career on one run. So I went on 7 or 8 different runs. This was still my favorite, but each place I enjoyed myself. Yeah. I think the thing I miss most is the crew. I was lucky I had a really good crew. And we worked together as a team, and we're friends off the boat. Everybody was very supportive, and went through a lot of personal things in each one of the crew, and you could kind of sympathize with them, and an ear to listen to, like the old-fashioned captains used to do, so that was the best part. You have to have, if the crew don't like you, they're not gonna help you out when you're in a pinch, and that's just the way of the ocean, so. I always knew I wanted a wooden steering wheel because I designed this dining room to look like a wheelhouse, so I could put a lot of my stuff up here. So they ask you when you retire, the crew says, well, they don't want to get you the wrong thing. They always put the money together and buy something special. I said, well, actually, all I want, some people got metal detectors because they're retiring, and somebody got a bicycle one year. I said, no, I just want a wooden steering wheel so I can mount it in the dining room like I always wanted to do. So they did go and get that for me, and presented it at my retirement party, and then somebody piped up in the back, well, where's the rest of the ship, so, yeah. But yeah, to me, this is special because that's what I wanted, and I like to look at it, and none of the ships have wooden steering wheels anymore, so to me, it was kind of cool, yeah. But finally, after 35 years, I could leave, and felt I did a good job, and next morning I heard a foghorn and I felt even better. So, no, I would say that was, every day was fun on there with my crew, but the last day I was kind of proud I'd done the career and I'd stuck with it, and there was a lot of obstacles, especially for the first one. So, I hate to say it, but the last day was the best day. Every day was fun, but it was like, because then it was like an accomplishment. You'd close the circle, done the job, no accidents.